Hi, I'm Curt Doty with RealmIQ. This is our podcast, RealmIQ Sessions, where we talk about everything AI with AI leaders from around the world. Please give us a follow and or subscribe. Today's guest is Svetlana Makarova. For over decades, Svetlana has been at the forefront of developing digital solutions across a range of industries, always with a focus on harnessing new technologies. She is now focused on AI solutions, but also empowering leaders to unravel AI's complexities and discover its profound impact. Welcome, Svetlana. So let's get into it. Let's, elaborate, please, on your background, your solutions, and how you are working in the world of AI.
Yeah, I don't know how far you'd like me to go, but I'll just kind of start with like some themes about my background. So I don't have a traditional tech background, as probably most people who end up in tech are. But my background is in biochemistry and psychology. I just figured that I wanted to I'm the type of person that likes to understand things to like I want to say like molecular level, which is where biochemistry came in, and then psychology. We need to understand how people work and I think those two things, those two type of skill set kind of carry through my career because I am a problem solver. I like to understand and take things apart into different components to really understand it. Because if you understand how things work, you can build things with them. So that's kind of been my fascination and a thread throughout my life. And then I got my MBA. So it kind of enabled me to understand business at a higher level, understand kind of how things operate across big enterprises. But also I'm one again, I love to understand how things work. I'm trained in UX, visual design, data analytics. So all of the components of product basically for me to be able to lead teams or lead kind of product initiatives more successfully. So I've always been that way. And I think it just more recently I've been fascinated even more. And I think the world of AI kind of came as I was in a way kind of forced into it, but that opened up a new world to me because I was like, this is a new area that I don't understand and it's never ending. And I think that's what motivates me to continue and learn more. Because the moment that you think that you understand something, like here's something like a new evolution of AI happening in this place. So there's always something new to learn, a new skill to gain, and that kind of motivates me. But yeah, no, I think I've been doing AI for the last, I want to say three years or so.
Mhm.
And I've been focusing on leading teams, developing quite complex solutions within healthcare. And then I think, as you mentioned in the introduction, I've started to kind of raise my voice about and share my knowledge on LinkedIn primarily. And that kind of grew a following. And following that, I had folks kind of leaning in, asking for guidance, advice on solutioning, scaling solutions, how to use them in their enterprise, how to scale products, maybe that they've built to an MVP stage, but then they have difficulties actually building a full-fledged solution, change management, everything that comes across, I've done at an enterprise level. And I think if I can do it within healthcare, I think anything else, any other industry becomes significantly easier.
Yeah, well, fascinating that you're in healthcare. I was pre-med before I went to art school, but so I share a similar kind of right brain, left brain equality in terms of interest and thinking. And so in healthcare, please tell me like what you've been doing with AI in healthcare, because I think that's a fascinating aspect of AI because there's some altruistic goals there for, people's or patients' outcomes in terms of healthcare. So elaborate on that a little more.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize, so I'm at an organization that has embraced AI quite early. So that's why they've been doing AI for quite some time. And I focus in kind of the initiatives that I support have an enterprise-wide view, but there are specialties, distinct specialties within the organizations that have their own AI initiatives that are very specific to their practice. For example, if you're in radiology, you've seen all the cool stuff that's happening in AI for specific to, again, to that specialty, to surgery. We don't focus maybe as much on that because that is quite niched to specific specialties. So the projects that I undertake have this enterprise lens, and that's why scale is important. So anything that we build cannot just work for one or two specialties. It actually has to have this broader focus. So some of the initiatives, and I think one that I can talk about, and I've actually presented this at the American Telehealth Conference earlier this year, like Nexus 2024, was one of the earlier projects we developed was an expertise finding tool that enabled us to locate different areas of expertise that someone needs to consult someone on. So, for example, what actually happens and the nature of the organization that I work within is multidisciplinary care is very crucial. So, when you're in the moment of providing care, you have a question that you have to ask. But when you have such a huge organization, you have, I think we have over 4,000 physicians, and let's say I'm gonna overestimate, but like maybe 10,000, advanced practice providers. Like, who do you ask? Like, how can I find the right person to ask if they're not maybe my colleague or if I don't have a network of people to realize? So we've developed this AI system to look across data across the enterprise, and we looked across lots of different data sources to create a profile for providers to understand, okay, in the moment of need, who can we reach out to? And then that was really crucial because previous to that, everything was done manually. And because physicians don't have time even to do a lot of their administrative work, this is the last thing that they're going to worry about is figuring out how to, provide their areas of expertise manually to some tool that is going to be rule-based type of recommendation system. So we knew that we wanted to kind of take a low hanging fruit solution. We knew it was needed. It is highly used within the organization. Even the manually derived, it just wasn't getting updated on a regular basis. And just to give you a perspective, the system that the organization was using that was manually derived, physicians haven't updated sometimes for like years. So on an annual basis, I think they were updating the system like 2 to 3%, but we know the practice evolves, skill sets evolve. And so it often happened that when that interdisciplinary connection would happen, they would be reaching out to the wrong person or patients would be scheduled to the wrong provider. And so there are multiple kind of needs that we were addressing. So it was not directly impacting healthcare in that point. So we knew it was lower risk, but we knew it was high value to the organization because one of the core principles of the organization that I work on is this, and they call it magic. It's the magic of the organization where I work is that multidisciplinary care. So we knew it was core objective of the organization. We knew it was high value. So that just to give you a sense as to what types of solutions. Then some of the other tools, just to give you a perspective within healthcare, clinical decision tools. We look at information. So how do we democratize knowledge of data or knowledge of the providers? I don't know if you've ever kind of come across or if you had a condition and you're like, oh, I have these symptoms. And then you go on Google and one of the top results come up is, again, the organization that authors this content. And, how do you democratize that? So like if someone has a need for a specific question, how do you take the knowledge that the organization has inherent in its EHR and its data, and then you help surface those insights back to the provider? So it's truly putting the organizational data to work and then really democratizing that knowledge. So that's kind of some of the ideas between clinical decision tools, but there's other things that are quite complex in nature that I've kind of helped lead the efforts in, but hopefully can kind of get you a taste for the types of solutions I've been kind of behind.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And when you think about healthcare and consumers wanting information, it's impossible to get in to see a doctor,
Yeah.
It takes 6 months sometimes to get an appointment because that's a
Hmm.
very stressed system. Obviously, emergency situations are different, but the fact that you're providing a service and information both to providers as well as patients, potential patients, or people in need of information and democratizing that, I think that's very noble. And again, I mentioned the altruistic goals of medicine, and I think this is a category I believe is where AI can thrive because it's less encumbered by some of the challenges that are happening in Hollywood with deep fakes and all this other type of negativity around AI when you're proving really valid outcomes and benefits to using this research. in terms of databases, right? Because
Hmm.
we are the data, people are the data, right? And healthcare sits on a huge mountain of data. There's certain
Hmm.
laws around the protection of that, the HIPAA laws. So, how are you safeguarding those types of aspects of privacy as it relates to patients' privacy? And tell me how that works a little in terms of LLMs and data sets.
Yeah, and I'll kind of preface that some of the solutions that I focus on have a lens to that, and then it kind of the answer depends. But the solutions that I focus on, kind of the overarching objective is for us to alleviate the administrative burden of the providers. So people who are actually providing care. So how do we deliver solutions so that they can do less of the repetitive tasks and then focus on delivering patient care? And so our solutions, or we have other teams that kind of focus on that, on the patient kind of tools. We focus on kind of the providers. And the reason why I say it depends. So for, let's say for that expertise finding solution, we didn't have to have patient information in the actual data set to train our models. So we could de-identify, we could basically get the type of data we were using had very specific data points that would not have even value to us from a PHR perspective for us to even include, because in that perspective we worry about what type of skill sets the provider has,
Hmm.
not specific to what types of patients they are treating. You
Okay.
can get that. So for example, you don't even need age, because again, the types of maybe credentials that the provider holds, they can be a pediatric physician or an adult physician. That's sufficient for us to understand, hey, this is a pediatric like focused. If you have a pediatric type question, here are the providers that you need to focus. So there are use cases or solutions where you do have to like be reasonable for like, do I really need PHI type of data? And then so you do identify and you just use the data that is crucial for you to develop that solution. The other example that I provided to you for like clinical decision tools, when the providers are actually delivering care to the patient, you want to integrate some of these AI solutions within the chart. You want to contextualize it and you want to embed it into the workflow. So there are times when PHI is actually important. So, and again, the only people who are seeing this data are the providers who are providing care, and the way that I think you are safeguarding it. And then there's multiple, I want to say, like levels of control that you kind of have to pass before you can even display that data. And so there's role-based controls, there's data governance, there is, for you to integrate it within, let's say the EHR system. For you to even get to that patient screen, you have to have the right levels of control within that EHR record. So again, there's multiple levels of security for you to get to that level. So let's say if you're not authorized to see a certain piece of data, then you won't display anything in the tool, because again, there's multiple validation systems that you have to kind of pass in order for us to even surface that data back to you.
That's fantastic. So, what a wonderful playground to figure out AI governance. And now you're branching into business, not just healthcare. So, what are you seeing in terms of the ease of transferring your knowledge and discipline into areas of business, which have been slower to embrace it possibly than healthcare?
Yeah, and it's a passionate topic of mine. I'm writing more and more on this topic on the blog/newsletter. So I do think that adoption, so, and I say this a lot even in my LinkedIn post, if you go back, I think that unfamiliar is uncomfortable. So organizations that I've spoken to, I go to networking events and I speak to a lot of business leaders. The moment you say AI, people say black box,
Mm.
because again, it's unfamiliar and then it's uncomfortable. So people kind of stay away. And one example that I like to provide is, when you go to a conference and let's say, maybe your audience has some experience going to conferences or these big events, right? First of all, when you walk into a big crowd, you don't gravitate and like to random, groups of people and just kind of start the conversation. Some people do. Like I've been called out on that before. They'll be like, I'm the type of person that will actually jump into any conversation, but most people would not.
Yeah.
And the reason why is like those folks are not familiar. And then you have all of these ideas and preconceptions for like what they might think of you. And so typically we have the tendencies to stay away from things that are unfamiliar, and we gravitate towards booths, or we contact folks who are the same networking or event or the conference, like, hey, where are you? Like, let's kind of hang together, because we want to kind of gravitate towards like these familiar things. And I think when you kind of break down the concepts, and I think what a lot of the courses, books that I've read, and I've done a lot of that, they don't do AI justice, is breaking down the concepts to the core of what they are, which is kind of what I love to understand. And I like to create patterns and truly understand how things work. All AI systems are really pattern finders. They find patterns in data, and that's what they do. And so I think the when you start building on the foundations and you kind of give examples for what the AI, and I speak about it in terms of capabilities, what can AI do? You know, and it gives you a perspective. Okay, I need data, I need this capability, and okay, I get a sense. So once you kind of open up that black box and you understand all AI is just data and capabilities, it becomes much easier to apply it to your business objectives. Because sometimes in the way that I kind of, and I don't just do AI, sometimes when I come and I solution a particular problem or an objective for the organization, sometimes, and I've called out like even in different workshops, sometimes I'm like, that doesn't need AI. So all you're kind of doing during workshops, when you're looking at specific processes, when you're looking to enhance products or revamp old systems, you're just basically trying to understand, well, what do I need to do in order to for this product to work, for this product to scale? And you align that capability to, is this a rule-based type of thing? Can we do that with a rule-based automation? Or is there sufficient amount of data and potential for learning that actually would benefit from an AI system? So once you kind of understand some of these capabilities, you've built the foundation, you're like, okay, I see what AI is. All it's doing is really expediting a lot of the things that you were able to do with rule-based systems significantly further. And there's additional benefits, as I mentioned, with learning mechanisms, networking effects that you get from these systems, but not every product actually needs it. So you have to be kind of critical when you're developing these systems, or when you're creating the strategies for these systems. You have to be like, okay, I need this. For example, I would love for us, the objective could be, I would love for us to recommend better products to our existing consumers. I would like for them to check out with not only one product, but provide a relevant recommendation to them at checkout so that they can add it on. Well, I don't think that's a rule-based task, just because just thinking about the number of customers you have to satisfy, and you kind of have to go one by one and figure out, well, what kind of, let's say, products they've purchased in the past, what kind of things, or what's their price point. There's just so many different factors you have to then convert into rule-based at scale. That doesn't work. So I think that there's telltale signs when you're kind of developing this workflow and you're looking at a specific task you want the system to do, and you're like, okay, well, how would it reasonably work? And if scale is an issue, like we'll never get it done with like by defining rules, that's like a sure sign that you need AI in it, because that is kind of the whole benefit and premise of AI system is scalability aspect of it, learning, and then being able to do that at scale, like at higher volumes.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and I appreciate the analytical mind that you have. You talk about this was kind of a freeze, a paralysis, and a barrier that even when you're at a networking event,
Mhm.
people can't gravitate towards other people unless they have something in common, or there's some type of affinity understanding, when that's really a barrier, because you need to be talking to those people who don't know about the benefits of AI and break the ice. I believe that there is a thaw in that happening right now, after a year and a half or more of generative AI discussions and experiments. I think people are more curious now than ever because these companies are going to have to deal with it. The EU Act is getting implemented in Europe. We'll
Yeah.
see how the United States follows. But how are you going to break that wall, that divide, and increase AI adoption? I know you do a lot of work, you do a lot of talking and writing.
Yeah.
I do the same, but sometimes it's not enough. And, what's the guidance there for yourself as well as other people who are very interested in the evangelism of, what is a revolutionary technology that can definitely benefit business?
Yeah. And I think just probably the listeners won't know, but before we started this podcast, I asked like, who is your target audience?
Yeah.
Right. And because I want to understand, and so I don't get into like the very, very geeky definitions of AI, that we kind of keep it higher level, just so that you kind of target your advice or target
Yeah.
the information I deliver to the right audience at the right level. And same thing goes for when you are in these discussions about AI adoption or AI in general, you kind of have to understand your audience. And then there's different types of people. So if you're a worker and you're trying to, and your objective is to, you've heard about AI, you've heard a lot of the stories, people optimizing their workflows with AI, it's game changing. My advice for them would be different than like the types of things that I would suggest for them to do. But a lot of it comes down to practice. And then when you talk about businesses, and kind of this is where my strength is understanding the business side of AI and how people could use it to increase value for their customers or for their business and basically optimize their operational efficiencies. So there's three types of companies that McKinsey had kind of segmented. And I think your recommendations would depend and sometimes intermix between, but you have kind of the folks who are what McKinsey calls takers. You have makers. No, hold on. So you have, yeah, takers, shapers, and makers. I'm sorry. So the takers are folks or smaller companies, typically like a small boutique shop. Let's say they don't have a big budget to adopt AI solutions, but they see value, or maybe they've educated themselves or seen enough in the space about AI. They're like, oh, I think it could be valuable into our organization. I just don't know what use cases in my organization to apply this to. But kind of again, my guidance to them would be knowing the size of the company, the budget that they have. They're probably are not going to invest into like cloud infrastructure. So you are going to be looking at a suite of subscription tools that will enable the operations within their organization. So you look strategically across what kind of verticals do they have? Not, if you're a smaller boutique, you probably have maybe two or three parts of your like organization, maybe marketing, legal, sales, and that's kind of what you're focused on. So what subscription tools can you recommend to basically augment their workflows, to improve their products within those basically three pieces? But you have, again, like your mind is set on recommending tools that are existing in the market.
Right.
Because again, there's subscription costs, but it's a lesser cost to run because they don't need big, a
People.
huge number of licenses or people to actually like operate these AI systems. When you're kind of in that shaper segment, which is the second segment, these organizations tend to have some understanding about what AI can do. Maybe they've dabbled with AI, they've kind of experimented, they've built proof of concepts even. So maybe they've built these no code agents. They've demonstrated some signal that it's going to work and there's value in it. And so those types of companies tend to take an existing tools and they customize them. So it could be like a small to medium segment type of customers who have a little bit more budget. They are more willing to invest in some infrastructure to house those models, whether it's again like maintained by a development agency, or they bring or kind of have their own cloud environment. And the reason why cloud is important is because a lot of these AI tools that you're customizing, they live within that cloud providers kind of space, like call it sandbox or whatever, like of different AI tools, which makes it easier to take existing models and then customize them. But that also, again, requires either you go development side, like development agency side, and you hire these folks to actually customize these solutions for you, or you hire experts to actually do that on your behalf. But again, like the premise there is that you're taking existing like Gemini, GPT-4, GPT 3.5, and you're adding layers on top of it, and you're customizing that solution. And then let's say you integrate it into different workflows so that you deliver the seamless experience. So that's kind of the shaper market. And the way that I kind of think about the makers are people who you probably are not going to go there, although we've made solutions within my organization as well from scratch. So if there are no existing models or solutions that kind of you can even customize, you kind of have to build your own solution from scratch. So OpenAI, that's what they did. They built a transformer LLM type of system and they build it completely from scratch. So when you in that kind of again, and that's kind of very expensive. These are the big enterprises, the IBMs, the Googles, the Microsofts, like they play in that space because that is a very costly thing to do. So most companies actually fall, I want to say like small to medium sized businesses fall into that cheaper segment because they see the value and the true value of AI comes from customization and actually putting your own data to work.
Yeah.
And you're actually building these systems more securely because you're kind of have your cloud provider and all of these security systems around it. You can add role-based controls. You have more control over your data that you're enabling that you wouldn't be able to do with subscription tools. So again, then you're kind of saying like, well, okay, that's all nice and great, but how can you help these organizations like do that? Again, similar thing, you're going to go across your organization, you're going to look for use cases, but now that you know, hey, they do have an infrastructure, they do have IT teams, they do have development, they might have gaps in their skill sets, but that's okay. Let's identify what objectives you've set for your organization. Let's look across the organization where you can deliver on those objectives. Maybe it's sales, maybe it's marketing. Let's focus on those two parts of the organization and let's look at what currently doesn't work. So you're looking at bottlenecks and pain points, maybe old systems. And I've done that before where there have been systems built in non-scalable ways. And for it to scale, like sometimes it just makes sense to like completely shut down an effort to be able to build something quicker and more scalable. So you're really evaluating either the product mixes, the operational workflows, and then you're saying, okay, where can we make an impact to deliver on those objectives? And then again, you kind of go how I've mentioned it. You give them use cases for AI, but you bring them along on that journey. Like it's not just, me as a consultant going back and analyzing. I can do that. But the key here and the key to change management with AI is bringing folks along on this journey so that they're in it, they understand how it works, they understand what goes into it, and then they become much more empowered and enabled in the future to understand, oh, I see. I mean, we could probably use AI to do that. Now that we understand what it's capable of, and again, that kind of comes down to practice again. You do this enough times, you do the POCs enough times that you're like, okay, well, I think AI could do that. Like we have this need, we've identified, and I think that's a really good use case for AI. And you can even go like a level further and say like we could use an LLM for that.
Mhm.
I wouldn't solution first with the right technology for multiple different reasons, but as long as you understand like, hey, that's a capability that AI can perform and it's totally useful here, you would again provide those recommendations in a different way, but again, with the lens that you're probably going to customize something in that workflow to bring that whole full scale benefit to that part of the organization.
Yeah, you speak of empowerment. I think it's a powerful word. And the idea that an outside consultant like yourself doesn't know necessarily the exact processes or workflows that the employees or business leaders are using within the organization. So to throw it back on them to analyze their own workflows and define with your suggestions on where AI could help in certain steps. And if you're replacing some of those steps, that's great. If it's two or three steps that you're replacing with AI, you've increased their productivity by 30%. And and then sharing those results across divisions, right?
Mhm.
When you talk about POCs, proof of concepts, even internally, I imagine you are building AI heroes within an organization to then become advocates, right? To help really transform that business. And it has to happen from within, and you're facilitating that, I see. And I think that's a fantastic approach. I call it, building an AI operation. How do you
Mhm.
transform existing corporate business structure? At what point do you enter? Is it the C-suite? Is it HR? Is it marketing, sales? I mean, I believe you need to start somewhere and then grow through positive proof of concepts, have affected workflows, shown efficiencies, and then, spread that through evangelism within the organization, and it catches fire, right? I mean, that's how businesses transform. It's not necessarily from a top-down mentality. I just don't
Mhm.
believe that a CEO is going to be the leader in that charge, because he is not involved in, he or she, I should say, is not involved into that in that day to day, and may not know all those steps within various departments under their purview. And so it's really working with the middle management, right? And it's not necessarily bottom up, but I think starting in the middle is where to go. Is that what you have found? Is that your entry point? And how have you strategically kind of penetrated that bubble of corporate structure to influence it?
Yeah. And I think in different phases, I would call them, of kind of your discovery process, you're going to involve different stakeholders. And I'll tell you why. So, first, you want to understand the business objectives. You're not just going to, again, toss LLM, like the question, where are you going to put it? Like, what, okay, LLM is great, but so you kind of start with the business objectives, and you need to talk to the key stakeholders of that organization, who tend to be the C-suite or managers of a smaller agency, whoever. So folks who make decisions, or who set those objectives or goals for the organization, so you can kind of understand, and everyone can kind of agree, okay, this is what our focus is, and this is where I think strategically where we want to go in the next year, 2 years, 5 years. When you're actually doing the work that I was kind of outlining, understanding, okay, well, which part of the business can actually deliver on that? So you're going and saying marketing. Well, the CEOs and the C-suites and the folks understand those processes at a higher level. They don't know the intricacies of that process. So they won't be the right people to ask to give you like the detailed workflow or how that product works. You have to go to the SMEs.
Yeah.
You have to ask the folks who are actually either doing that work or the managers of, to be able to look at either that product or that service or that kind of workflow, to be able to understand, okay, here are the different steps. Okay, if we were to improve it, and then you do a workshop with them to, again, they're the SMEs, they're the experts. I'm just kind of the guide to like help them get to a certain state, because no one can do it better. And they have also, they bring the lens of whether it's going to work in production, right? I can recommend, I can come back behind the scenes, work on something, and come back with a recommendation a week later. And what am I going to get? They'll be like, that's nuts. It's never going to work. You don't understand our situation. So it's better to build and enhance this together with, while doing education and while empowering them. So you kind of create, for the lack of a better word, requirements for what you want that product, service, whatever to do. And then when you go into the phase of proof of concept building, you are working with the tech and experts. So you don't need SMEs at that point. You've kind of captured their requirements. You understand what the intent is. You understand how you could actually deliver value back to the organization. You do some ROI estimates, and then you get approval from basically leadership to move that forward to the proof of concept stage. You build the proof of concept, ideally in the shortest amount of time possible, because all you're looking for at that stage is not built for scale, it's built to give you a signal whether what you're building is going to work, it has even the promise or like some indication that it's going to deliver on that value.
Yeah.
So it's very low expectations, and that's why you kind of have to optimize for speed, because the time you're wasting on proof of concept is also time you could be investing back in focusing on something else. So I think empowerment and bringing your folks along on that journey is going to be really key. And the types of folks you're involving during different steps of that process really vary, but they bring different value or different information to the process. So hopefully it kind of ends up flowing and working in the end. And then you decide following proof of concept, is this something that we want to invest further in and we want to actually scale? Do we want to put in all of the production level systems in place in order to really scale it? And sometimes for proof of concept, sometimes you're like, well, where am I going to get data? I can't get that quickly. We need to jump hoops, get big data. So the name is escaping me, but like synthetic data.
Mhm.
So maybe you could purchase it from like public data sets, but it has to be directionally or at least mimic the type of data you would be replacing it with in production. But just think outside of the box, figure out like the objective for that proof of concept is to just demonstrate that it's going to work or has some promise of working if you were to scale that solution. So that's how you de-risk that investment, because once you get into that customization workflow, that's when things get expensive, not during the proof of concept. And that's why I think it's key to optimize for speed and do it to the least fidelity possible. And sometimes we've built products with code. Like all we could basically demonstrate at the end of like that proof of concept was just code. And basically developers saying like, imagine that this has a UI for this, and like this is the input, and it will show us a part of the code where the input is. And then here's the output. Cool, sufficient, as long as it's again demonstrating that some promise that that type of a solution will work when it's scaled.
Yeah. But we are moving towards a no-code world, right?
Oh yeah,
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 which is
making
fascinating.
things easier.
Yeah, the need for speed, breaking out of that black box. I really appreciate the themes that you've been discussing, and I can tell you are very passionate, and not only passionate but well educated and well spoken. So thank you so much for your insights. I want to give you a moment before we have to close here to plug anything that you're doing, any destination in which people can find you and consult with you. Happy to support any of your efforts. So plug away.
Yes, thank you. So you can find me on LinkedIn. That's my primary platform for now. My website's being built, but the company that I've founded is called Spark Change, where I basically guide and advise companies on how to scale their initiatives. We do workshops, basically following that same process that I've kind of outlined here. And I think as the website is being built, I'm also trying to, again, author content that I can deliver a lot of guides, ROI calculations, like how do you actually do each part of this process, some of the best practices and frameworks. So sign up to my newsletter if you want to hear more, as I'm kind of building that kind of library of tools. And so once that's ready, I will be making an announcement. So if you assign to my newsletter, you'll be one of the first ones to know.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Svetlana. I follow you. I want to continue that and love to have you back on the show. And to everyone
Yeah.
listening or watching, thanks for tuning in, and catch more of our Realm IQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify and YouTube. So please follow and smash that subscribe button. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
RealmIQ. Book your corporate AI workshop today.
CurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing and product development.